The crystal had been sitting in the same spot for 4,000 years. It was beautiful in a strange way. The size of a human heart, it glowed with soft blue light that never faded. Patterns moved inside it like tiny rivers of electricity, flowing and changing but never stopping. The aliens called it the cipher, and it was the most famous object in the entire galaxy. Long ago, before any of the current species had built their first cities, another civilization had existed. They called themselves They had traveled between stars when other species were still learning to make fire. They had understood things about the universe that modern scientists could only dream about. And then one day they disappeared. Nobody knew why, nobody knew where they went. They left behind only ruins, empty cities on dead worlds, and this one small crystal. The Galactic Council had found it floating in the wreckage of a station 3,000 years ago. They quickly understood that it contained information. The patterns inside were data compressed and encrypted. The greatest minds in the galaxy believed it held the secrets of the technology that could change everything, cures for diseases that killed millions, methods to travel faster than light without the huge ships they currently needed, perhaps even the answer to why they had vanished. But there was a problem. The crystal was locked. Every species in the Galactic Council had tried to open it. The Pelions were first. They were tall beings with silver skin and 3 eyes, and they considered themselves the most intelligent species in known space. Their mathematicians worked on the cipher for 200 years. They built special computers just to attack its encryption. They developed entirely new branches of mathematics trying to understand its patterns. In the end, they failed. The cipher remained locked. The tried next. They were small creatures that looked like insects, but their minds could connect together. When a million focused on the same problem, they became like one giant brain. They surrounded the cipher with their bodies and thought at it together for 50 years. The combined intelligence of a billion minds pushed against the encryption. The cipher did not care. It stayed locked. There were machines. They had started as organic beings long ago but had uploaded their minds into metal bodies. They could think faster than any biological creature. They ran simulations for 300 years, trying every possible combination, every mathematical approach they could imagine. They processed more data than all the other species combined. The cipher ignored them completely. After the dozens of other species tried, some spent years, some spent centuries, a few went mad from the attempt. One species, the Hollow, had devoted their entire civilization to cracking the cipher. They had stopped exploring space. They had stopped building new things. Every resource, every mind, every moment of their existence went into solving the puzzle. After 800 years of trying, they gave up. Their civilization collapsed from the effort and they faded into history. The Galactic Council eventually stopped trying. They decided that some things were simply impossible. They had been too advanced. Their technology was too far beyond what modern species could understand. Trying to crack the cipher was like an ant trying to understand a spaceship. The gap was too large. So they put the cipher in a museum. Helix Prime was the largest space station in the galaxy. It floated at the center of Council space, a massive ring of metal and glass that held millions of beings from hundreds of species. The station had everything: markets, homes, government buildings, parks, and one very famous museum. The Museum of Lost Things held artifacts from dead civilizations, weapons that no longer worked, art from species that no longer existed, technology that nobody could understand anymore. And in the center of the main hall, behind a shimmering energy field, sat the cipher. A small plaque floated in front of it. The words were written in the common language that all Council species shared. It said, "The unbreakable reminder, a symbol of humility, some knowledge is beyond reach." Visitors came from across the galaxy to look at it. They would stand before the glowing crystal and feel small. They would think about how even the greatest minds had failed. They would leave feeling humble, reminded that the universe was bigger than any species could comprehend. The Council was proud of this. They believed that accepting limits was a sign of wisdom. They believed that knowing when to stop was more important than never giving up. The cipher had taught them this lesson, and they were grateful for it. For 4,000 years, this was the truth. The cipher was unbreakable, the case was closed, the matter was settled. And then the humans arrived. Humanity had only made contact with the galaxy 18 months ago. A Pelion scout ship had detected strange radio signals coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. They had investigated and found a species that was just beginning to explore space. The humans had crude rockets that used chemical fuel. They had not even colonized their own moon properly. By galactic standards, they were practically primitive. The Council had debated what to do with them. Some wanted to ignore them until they developed further. Others wanted to study them like interesting animals. In the end, they decided to offer them provisional membership in the Council. It was a political move, mostly, a way to seem generous and open-minded. The humans had accepted eagerly. They sent diplomats, they sent scientists, they sent traders. They were excited and curious, like children visiting a new playground. The older species found them amusing, sometimes annoying, mostly harmless. Nobody expected anything important from them. They were too young, too simple, too new. What could they possibly offer to civilizations that had existed for millions of years? The answer was coming. It would arrive in the form of a quiet man with a battered, standing in a museum, looking at a crystal that the entire galaxy had given up on. But that moment was still a few days away. For now, the cipher sat in its case, glowing softly, keeping its secrets, waiting, almost as if it knew that something was about to change. Outside the museum, ships came and went from Helix Prime. Millions of beings lived their lives, unaware that their understanding of the universe was about to shift. The unbreakable reminder would soon need a new name. And the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Park had never wanted to go to space. When he was young, he had dreamed of small things, a quiet job, a small apartment, maybe a cat. He had studied computers in university because they made sense to him. Machines followed rules. They did what you told them to do. They did not surprise you or confuse you or make you feel awkward at parties. He had worked for a software company in Seoul for 8 years. His job was boring but comfortable. He fixed old programs that companies still needed but nobody wanted to update. Legacy systems, they were called. Ancient code written decades ago that somehow still ran important things. Banks used them, hospitals used them, was very good at understanding these old, forgotten programs. He could look at code that made other engineers cry and figure out what it was trying to do. Then the aliens came. When humanity made first contact, everything changed. Suddenly there were new technologies to learn, new species to meet, new opportunities everywhere. The government needed people who could work with both human systems and alien ones. They needed translators, engineers, diplomats. They needed anyone who was willing to leave Earth and represent humanity among the stars. Had not volunteered, his boss had volunteered him. The company had received a government contract to help maintain human equipment on the diplomatic vessel Horizon. Someone needed to go into space and keep the old Earth technology running alongside the new alien systems. Was the best choice because he was good at his job and had no family to leave behind. So here he was, 18 months later, living on a spaceship surrounded by stars and aliens and wonders beyond imagination. And he was miserable. It was not that space was bad. The Horizon was actually quite comfortable. The food was acceptable. His quarters were small but private. The problem was the people. There were 47 humans on the Horizon and struggled to talk to any of them. They were mostly soldiers and diplomats, confident people who knew how to shake hands and make jokes. Did not know how to do these things. He spent most of his time alone, fixing equipment and avoiding social events. The only person who refused to let him hide was Lieutenant was the Horizon's communications officer. She was 31 years old, sharp-tongued and absolutely determined to drag out of his shell. She had decided, for reasons did not understand, that he was her project. Every few days she would appear at his door and announce that they were going somewhere. "You cannot spend your entire life in this room," she would say. "We are in space, actual space. There are aliens out there, amazing things are happening, and you want to sit here and stare at code." Would try to explain that he was comfortable staring at code. Would not listen. She would grab his arm and pull him toward whatever adventure she had planned. Today, the adventure was Helix Prime. The Horizon had docked at the station that morning for routine diplomatic meetings. Most of the crew had duties to attend to, did not. His equipment was working fine for once, which meant he had nothing to do. This was dangerous because it gave an opportunity. She found him in the mess hall, eating lunch alone, reading technical documents on his. "We are going to the museum," she announced, sitting down across from him. Looked up. What museum? The Museum of Lost Things. It is supposed to be incredible. They have artifacts from civilizations that died 1,000,000 years ago. They have weapons that could destroy planets. They have that famous crystal thing that nobody can open. The cipher said he had read about it. Everyone had read about it. The most famous locked box in the galaxy. Yes, that thing. Come on. When will you ever get another chance to see it? Considered arguing. He considered explaining that he would rather stay on the ship and review the new alien software protocols that the Council had sent, but he knew would not accept this. She never did. "Fine," he said. Smiled. "Good, finish your food. We leave in 10 minutes. Helix Prime was overwhelming, had visited a few alien stations before, but nothing like this. The corridors were massive, built for species much larger than humans. Beings of every shape and size moved around them. Some walked on 2 legs, some walked on 6, some floated, some slithered. The air was filled with strange smells and stranger sounds. Walked ahead, confident and curious, stopping to look at everything. Followed behind, trying not to bump into anyone. The aliens barely noticed them. Humans were still new and unimportant. A few glanced at them with what might have been amusement or pity, but most ignored them completely. The museum was in the center of the station. It was enormous, a building made of white stone and glass that seemed to glow from within. The entrance was guarded by 2 massive statues of creatures that did not recognize, extinct probably, another civilization that had lived and died while humans were still learning to walk upright. Inside, the halls stretched in every direction. Display cases held objects that could not begin to understand, machines with no obvious purpose, Art made of materials that did not exist in the human periodic table, weapons that looked beautiful and terrible at the same time. Pulled him from exhibit to exhibit, reading every plaque, asking questions of the guide programs that floated through the air, followed quietly, taking it all in but saying little. His mind wandered. He thought about the engineering required to build this place. He thought about how the display cases maintained their temperature. He thought about the power systems that kept everything running. This was how his mind worked. He did not see beauty first. He saw systems, he saw patterns, he saw the way things connected. They walked for an hour, maybe more, and then they reached the center of the museum. The cipher sat on a pedestal in the middle of a great circular room. The ceiling above it was transparent, showing the stars beyond. The crystal glowed with soft blue light and could see the patterns moving inside it, rivers of data flowing endlessly. He stopped walking, turned to look at him, pretty right. Did not answer. He was staring at the crystal, his head tilted slightly to one side. Something about it caught his attention, something in the way the patterns moved. He did not know what it was yet, but something felt familiar. Around them, aliens came and went, glancing at the cipher and moving on. They had all seen it before. They all knew it was impossible. Kept staring. He did not know it yet, but his life was about to change completely. The quiet engineer who just wanted to be left alone was about to become the most famous human in the galaxy. All because he saw something that everyone else had missed, stood in front of the cipher for a long time, waited beside him at first, but eventually she grew bored and wandered off to look at nearby exhibits. She was used to getting lost in thought. Sometimes he would stare at a piece of code for hours without speaking. This seemed to be one of those moments. The crystal was beautiful, yes, but that was not what held his attention. It was the patterns, the way they moved. They were not random, he realized. They had a rhythm, a structure. They repeated, but not exactly. Each cycle was slightly different from the last, like a song that changed a little bit each time it played. He had seen something like this before. He could not remember where. It nagged at the back of his mind, like a word on the tip of his tongue that refused to come out. Around him, aliens passed by. Most ignored him. A few gave him curious looks. Humans were still unusual enough to attract some attention. One, a being made of shining metal with glowing blue eyes, stopped beside him and observed for a moment. Interesting, is it not? They said. Its voice was flat and mechanical. The great puzzle, the eternal lock, 4,000 years of failure compressed into one small object. Nodded without looking away from the cipher. Has anyone tried talking to it? They made a sound that might have been laughter. Talking to it, it is a data core human, not a person. You cannot talk to it any more than you can talk to a rock. I talk to my code sometimes, said quietly. When it does not work, I ask it what is wrong. They stared at him for a moment, then walked away, did not notice. He was still watching the patterns. A few minutes later, a shadow fell over him. He looked up and saw a Pelion standing nearby. The creature was tall, almost 3 meters, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. 3 purple eyes looked down at him with an expression that might have been amusement. You are a human, the Pelion said. It was not a question. Yes, replied. I am ambassador. I represent the Pelion collective on this station. He gestured at the cipher with one long, thin arm. I see you are admiring our greatest mystery. Your mystery, asked. The council's mystery, corrected himself, though his tone suggested he did not really believe in the correction. We Pelions were the first to study it properly. We contributed more to understanding it than any other species. Even though we could not crack it, we learned much about its structure. Looked back at the crystal. What did you learn? Smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a teacher might give a student who asked a silly question. Things that would take you 100 years to understand, human. The mathematics involved are beyond your species. You have only been doing advanced calculations for 2 centuries? 3. We have been studying mathematics for 2 million years. The cipher uses concepts that your kind has not even discovered yet. Did not respond to the insult. He was used to being underestimated. People had been telling him he was not smart enough or important enough his whole life. It had stopped bothering him long ago. Can I touch it? He asked. Laughed out loud. Several nearby aliens turned to look. Touch it? The cipher is protected by a stasis field. Even if you could reach it, what would you do? Poke it with your finger and hope it opens. Shrugged. Sometimes things work differently when you touch them. Screens, interfaces, interactive systems. This is not some primitive human device, said, his voice sharper now. This is the most advanced artifact in the known galaxy. It was created by a civilization that mastered technologies we still do not understand. The idea that a human, of all things, could interact with it in any meaningful way is absurd. Had returned by now. She stood a few steps behind, her arms crossed, her eyes narrow. She did not like the way he was speaking to her friend. Is there a problem here? She asked. Glanced at her. No problem. I was simply educating your companion about the nature of the cipher. He seems to have some strange ideas about how to approach it. Is very good with systems, said. He has solved problems that our best engineers could not figure out. Human engineers, said dismissively. I am sure he is very impressive by your standards, but this is not a human problem. This is a galactic problem, and it has been solved already. The answer is that there is no answer. The cipher cannot be opened. Was not listening to the argument. He was still staring at the patterns. Something was clicking in his mind. The rhythm, the variations, the way each cycle built on the last. He knew this pattern. He knew it from somewhere. And then it hit him. It was not encryption. At least not the kind of encryption that everyone assumed. It was not trying to keep people out. It was doing something else entirely. It is teaching, he said suddenly. Stopped mid-sentence. What? The pattern, it is not random, it is not defensive, it is pedagogical, pointed at the crystal. Look at how it cycles. Each iteration adds a small piece of new information. It is building on previous cycles. It is not a lock, it is a lesson. Stared at him, then he laughed again, louder this time. A lesson? You think that the most advanced civilization to ever exist created a teaching program, for whom? For species that did not exist yet. Maybe, said simply. By now a small crowd had gathered. Other aliens had noticed the unusual conversation. A curator, a small insect-like creature named, pushed through the crowd to see what was happening. What is going on here? Asked. Her voice was high and clicking, translated by a device around her neck. This human believes he understands the cipher, said, his voice dripping with amusement. He thinks it is a teaching program. He wants to touch it. His compound eyes focused on, she studied him for a long moment. There was something strange in her gaze, not mockery exactly, something else, curiosity perhaps. Is this true? She asked. You believe you can interact with the cipher? Hesitated. I do not know, but I would like to try. The crowd murmured, made a dismissive sound, but continued to stare at the human. She had been the curator of this museum for 300 years. She had seen thousands of beings stand before the cipher and wonder about it, but she had never seen anyone look at it the way this human was looking at it. Very well, she said finally. The murmuring stopped, turned to stare at her. What? I will lower the stasis field, continued. You may examine the cipher directly for 10 of your Earth minutes. Consider it a diplomatic gesture, a sign of respect for our council members. Stepped forward. This is absurd. You cannot let a primitive species touch the most valuable artifact in the galaxy. I am the curator, said calmly. The decision is mine. She moved toward the control panel beside the display. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Grabbed arm. Are you sure about this? She whispered. Looked at the cipher. The patterns were still moving, still cycling, still waiting. No, he said honestly, but I want to try. Pressed a button. The shimmering energy field around the cipher flickered and disappeared. For the first time in centuries, the cipher was exposed. And stepped forward to meet it. The air in the museum seemed to change when the stasis field went down. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but felt it. A slight warmth. A faint hum that he could feel in his chest more than hear with his ears. The cipher was alive in a way that it had not been before, or maybe it had always been alive and the field had simply hidden it. He approached slowly, pulling his from his pocket. It was an old device, Earth-made, with scratches on the screen and a crack in one corner. He had owned it for 6 years. It ran on software that was considered ancient by galactic standards. Several aliens in the crowd made sounds of amusement when they saw it. He brings a human toy to examine the greatest artifact in the galaxy, someone whispered. Ignored them. He stopped 1 meter from the cipher and studied it closely. Up close, the patterns were even more complex. Rivers of light flowed through the crystal, branching and merging, speeding up and slowing down. There was definitely a rhythm, definitely a structure, and now that he was closer, he could see something else. A small interface panel at the base of the crystal. It was made of the same material as the cipher itself, smooth and glowing. A series of symbols floated above it. Input interface, he muttered to himself. He looked at the symbols. They were not like anything he had seen before. Not letters, not numbers, something else. Shapes that seemed to shift when he looked directly at them. He tapped his and connected it to the station's network. Then he searched for any records of previous attempts to interact with this interface. There were thousands, millions maybe. Every species had tried to input commands through it. Mathematical sequences, binary code, prime numbers, complex algorithms. Every conceivable pattern had been attempted. None had worked. Frowned, he looked at the symbols again. Then he looked at the patterns flowing through the crystal. And then he did something that no one had ever done before. He input a random string. Just garbage, nonsense, letters and numbers with no meaning whatsoever. The crowd murmured, made a disgusted sound, even looked confused. The cipher responded. Not by opening, not by rejecting the input, it did something different. The patterns inside it shifted, they reorganized themselves. And for just a moment, a new symbol appeared on the interface, a symbol that had not been there before. stared at it, then he smiled. You are teaching, he said softly. You are showing me what comes next. He input another string. This time he included the new symbol. The cipher responded again, the patterns shifted, another symbol appeared. It is a conversation, murmured, not a lock, a conversation. He kept going, input, response, input, response. Each time the cipher gave him something new. Each time he incorporated what he learned into his next attempt. It was exactly like learning a language or debugging a program. You try something, you see what happens, you adjust, you try again. The crowd had gone silent. Even was watching now, his three eyes wide. 3 minutes passed, his fingers moved faster on his, he was not thinking anymore. He was feeling, following the pattern, trusting his instincts. Everyone treated you like an enemy, he said to the cipher, his voice barely above a whisper. They attacked you, they tried to break you, but that is not what you want, is it? You want someone to learn, someone to listen, someone to ask nicely. 4 minutes. The patterns in the cipher were moving faster now. The light was brighter, something was building, something was changing. Looked at he looked at the symbols he had gathered, and suddenly he understood. It was not just like learning a language, it was exactly like something he had seen before, an old programming language from Earth. One of the first ever created, COBOL. The structure was similar, the logic was similar. The way commands built on each other was almost identical. No way, he breathed. But there was no time to think about what that meant. He could feel the cipher waiting. It had given him everything he needed. Now it was time for the final input. He typed the command. His hands were shaking slightly. He looked at, she was pale, her hands pressed against her mouth. He looked at, the curator's compound eyes were fixed on him, unblinking. He looked at, the ambassador's silver face had lost all color. Pressed enter. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the cipher opened. It did not explode or shatter or make any dramatic sound. It simply unfolded, like a flower blooming in fast motion. The crystals separated into dozens of pieces that floated apart, revealing a core of pure light inside, and from that light, images began to pour out. Star maps, hundreds of them, thousands, galaxies and nebulae and systems that no one had ever seen. Formulas, mathematical equations that filled the air like floating text. Some of them were simple, some of them were so complex that they made his head hurt just looking at them. Diagrams, machines, engines, medical devices, things that no living species had ever imagined. And data, endless streams of data. Information about biology, about physics, about chemistry. Information about diseases and cures, about energy and matter, about the fundamental nature of reality itself. They had not left behind just a puzzle. They had left behind a library, everything they knew, everything they had learned in their millions of years of existence, all of it stored in one small crystal, waiting for someone to ask for it properly. 5 minutes, it had taken 5 minutes to unlock 4,000 years of failure. The museum was silent, absolutely silent. Every being in the room stood frozen, staring at the flood of information pouring from the cipher. Some of them were crying, some of them were laughing, some of them simply could not move. Stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by the light of ancient knowledge, his old still clutched in his hand. He did not feel triumphant, he did not feel proud. Mostly he felt tired and confused and a little bit scared. He looked at, I think I did something big, he said. Stared at him, then she started laughing. It was a strange sound in the silent room, hysterical and joyful and terrified all at once. Something big, she repeated, you just changed the galaxy. He blinked at her. Then he looked around at the aliens, at the floating data, at the unfolded crystal that had been locked for longer than human civilization had existed. I just wanted to touch it, he said weakly. Behind him, Ambassador fell to his knees. His silver face was blank with shock, his three eyes stared at nothing. Impossible, he whispered, this is impossible. But it was not impossible, it had just happened, and nothing would ever be the same again. Curator was the first to move. She walked slowly toward, her small body trembling. When she reached him, she looked up at his face for a long moment. What is your name, she asked. He said Park. Nodded, then she turned to face the crowd. Remember this moment, she said, her voice carrying through the silent room. Remember this name, remember this species. Today a human did what no one else could do. Today everything changes. And she was right. The silence lasted for what felt like an eternity, stood in the center of the great hall, surrounded by floating streams of ancient data, and watched as the galaxy struggled to understand what had just happened. The first sound came from somewhere in the back of the crowd. A Pelian scientist dropped her recording device. It clattered against the floor with a sharp noise that echoed through the room. The sound seemed to break a spell. Suddenly, everyone was moving at once. Aliens pushed forward, trying to get closer to the data streams. Others backed away, as if afraid the information might be dangerous. Several linked their minds together, their antennae touching, trying to process what they were seeing. A group of stood perfectly still, their mechanical eyes recording everything. Grabbed arm and pulled him backward, away from the growing chaos. "We need to get out of here," she said. Why asked, he was still dazed, still trying to understand what he had done. "Because in about 5 minutes this place is going to be flooded with soldiers, scientists, and politicians, and they are all going to want to talk to you." She pulled harder on his arm. "Come on." But before they could move, Curator stepped in front of them. Her small body blocked their path, and her compound eyes stared up at with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You cannot leave," she said. "Not yet, I need to understand what you did." "I just followed the pattern," said. "It was teaching me, I paid attention and gave it what it asked for." "But how did you see that?" pressed. "A billion minds have studied this cipher. The greatest mathematicians in history have examined its patterns. None of them saw what you saw." Thought about it, the truth was he did not know, he had not done anything special. He had just looked at the cipher differently. Everyone else had seen an enemy to defeat. He had seen a system to understand. It was how he had always approached problems. It was how he fixed old code at his job back on Earth. "I did not try to break it," he said finally. "I tried to talk to it." Stared at him. "That is the most human answer I have ever heard." Before anyone could respond, the doors of the museum burst open. Security officers poured in, followed by officials in formal robes. More aliens crowded in behind them. Word had already spread. The cipher was open. The impossible had happened. Everyone wanted to see it for themselves. Ambassador had finally gotten back to his feet. His silver face was still pale, but his expression had shifted. The shock was gone. In its place was something harder, something angry. "This is a trick," he announced loudly. "This human has done something to corrupt the cipher. What we are seeing is not the real data. It cannot be." Turn to face him. "The cipher is functioning exactly as designed. The data is authentic. I have it myself." "Then the human must have received help," insisted. "Perhaps his species had contact with the before. Perhaps they are descended from them. Perhaps this was all planned. Perhaps you cannot accept that a species younger than your children solved a problem that defeated your entire civilization," said sharply. Turned to her, his 3 eyes narrowing. "You will show respect when speaking to me, human." "I will show respect when it is earned," replied. Put a hand on her shoulders. "Stop, this is not helping." But the damage was done. The crowd was dividing. Some aliens were staring at the data streams with wonder and excitement, eager to learn what they had left behind. Others were looking at with suspicion and fear. A few were already leaving, rushing off to inform their governments, their organizations, their people. The galaxy had just changed, and not everyone was happy about it. Raised her voice. "Enough, the cipher has been opened, the data is real. What matters now is what we do with it." She gestured at the floating images. Star maps, formulas, designs, the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that had existed for millions of years. It was more information than any living species could process in a lifetime, more than any 10 lifetimes. "They did not leave this for one species," continued. "They left it for everyone. Look at what they have given us. Cures for diseases, plans for engines that could take us to other galaxies, warnings about dangers we did not even know existed. This is a gift, the greatest gift any species has ever received." "And a human opened it," someone in the crowd said. The voice was quiet, but it carried. "A human." Looked down at his. The screen was still showing the command he had entered. Such a simple thing, a few symbols, a few numbers, 5 minutes of work. He thought about all the species that had tried before him. Billions of minds, millions of years. They had built supercomputers and developed new mathematics and devoted entire civilizations to this puzzle, and they had all failed. Why? Because they had all made the same mistake. They had all assumed the cipher was trying to keep them out. "It was never a lock," said quietly. Turned to him. "Explain." "Everyone called it the unbreakable lock, but it was never meant to be locked. It was a test. No, not even a test. A question. They wanted to know who would find them. What kind of species would be the first to understand." "Understand what?" demanded. Looked at the ambassador. "That you do not have to fight everything. Some things want to be understood. Some things are waiting for someone to approach them with curiosity instead of force." The room went quiet again. This time it was a different kind of silence, not shocked, thoughtful. A scientist stepped forward. Its metal body gleamed in the light of the cipher. "The human may be correct," it said. "Our analysis of the cipher always treated it as an adversarial system. We assumed it was designed to resist intrusion. We never considered that it might be designed to welcome collaboration. We attacked it," another voice said, "a part of the hive-minded group that had tried to crack the cipher centuries ago. We threw our combined intelligence at it like a weapon. We never thought to ask it what it wanted." Shook his head. "This is ridiculous. You are giving this human credit for being ignorant. He succeeded because he did not know any better. Or he succeeded because he knew something better," said. something that all of our advanced knowledge had made us forget. She walked toward the cipher. The crystal had stopped unfolding now. It floated in pieces around its core of light, still projecting data into the air, reached out and touched one of the pieces. It was warm under her fingers. "They were older than any of us," she said softly. "They had seen civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. When they created this cipher, they must have known who would eventually find it. They must have known what kind of species would dominate the galaxy after they were gone. Species like us," said, "advanced, intelligent, powerful." "And arrogant," replied, "so certain of our own brilliance that we forgot how to be students. We only knew how to be conquerors." She turned to look at, but they did not want conquerors. They wanted learners. They wanted someone humble enough to admit they did not know everything, and they waited 4,000 years to find one. Felt uncomfortable under her gaze. He was not humble, he was just awkward. He did not approach problems differently because of some special wisdom. He approached them differently because he did not know how else to approach them. But maybe that was the same thing. Maybe wisdom was not about knowing more. Maybe it was about being willing to admit that you knew less. Outside the museum, ships were already gathering. News was spreading across the station, across the sector, across the galaxy. The cipher was open. A human had done it. Everything was about to change. In Park, the quiet software engineer from Seoul who had never wanted to go to space, stood in the middle of it all, wondering what was going to happen next. Within 1 hour, the news had reached every corner of the Galactic Council. Within 2 hours, emergency sessions were being called on 100 different worlds. Within 3 hours, the most powerful beings in the galaxy were screaming at each other. The council chamber on Helix Prime was enormous. It was built like an amphitheater with thousands of seats arranged in rising circles around a central platform. Representatives from every member species had their own section, decorated with the colors and symbols of their people. Today, every seat was filled. Sat in a small observation room above the chamber, watching through a transparent wall. Sat beside him, her face pale with stress. Admiral Minyu stood behind them, arms crossed, his expression calm and unreadable. The Admiral was the commander of the human diplomatic mission. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had been a soldier for most of his life, and he had learned to stay calm in difficult situations. This situation was more difficult than anything he had ever faced. "They want to take the data," said quietly. "Some of them do," Minyu replied. "Others want to share it, others want to destroy it." "Destroy it?" Looked up in shock. "Why would anyone want to destroy it?" "Because knowledge is power," Minyu said, "and not everyone wants power to be shared." Below them, the debate raged. A Pelian representative was speaking, his voice amplified so the entire chamber could hear. "The cipher's contents must be secured immediately. We cannot allow this information to be distributed freely. Some of it may be dangerous, some of it may be misused. The council must take control." A representative interrupted. "The council, you mean the Pelians, you want to control the data for yourselves." "We want to protect the galaxy from reckless behavior," the Pelian shot back. "Or have you forgotten the Hollow? They destroyed themselves trying to crack the cipher. Imagine what might happen if this knowledge falls into the wrong hands." "All hands are the wrong hands to you," another voice called out. "Anyone who is not Pelian is unworthy." The chamber dissolved into shouting. Different species accused each other of greed, of arrogance, of hidden agendas. Ancient rivalries surfaced, old wounds were reopened. The cipher had been a symbol of unity for 4,000 years. Now that it was open, it threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Watched it all with growing horror. He had not meant for this to happen. He had just wanted to understand the pattern. He had just wanted to solve the puzzle. He had not thought about what would come after. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "No," Minyu said firmly, "this is not your fault. You did something remarkable. What these people do with it is their choice, not yours." "But if I had not opened it?" "Someone else would have, eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe in another 1,000 years, but someone would have figured it out." Minyu put a hand on shoulder. "You gave the galaxy a gift. What they do with it is up to them." The shouting below continued. A representative was now speaking, its mechanical voice cutting through the noise. "We propose an alternative. The human who opened the cipher must be studied. Perhaps he possesses abilities that we do not understand. Perhaps there is something unique about human cognition that allowed him to succeed where we failed." Felt a chill run down his spine, studied. "They want to examine you," said grimly. "Run tests, scan your brain, figure out what makes you different." "I am not different," said. "I just looked at the problem differently." "They will not believe that," Minyu said. "It is easier for them to accept that you have some special power than to accept that their approach was wrong for 4,000 years. A new voice rose in the chamber. It was a Pelian, but not ambassador. This one was older, with silver skin that had faded to pale gray. His name was, and he was known throughout the galaxy as a philosopher. "Listen to yourselves," said his voice quiet but somehow commanding. "Listen to what you are doing. The cipher has been open for 3 hours and already we are fighting over it. Already we are trying to control it, to possess it, to use it against each other." The chamber quieted slightly, was respected even by those who disagreed with him. "The left this knowledge for all of us," continued. "Not for the Pelians, not for any single species. They waited 4,000 years for someone to approach them with humility instead of arrogance. And when that person finally came, he was not from one of our great civilizations. He was from a species so young that some of us did not even consider them worthy of council membership." Turned to look up at the observation room. His eyes met through the transparent wall. "Perhaps that is the lesson they wanted us to learn, not the information in the cipher, but the way it was opened. We spent trying to conquer it. A human spent 5 minutes trying to understand it. Which approach was wiser?" The chamber was silent now. Even the most aggressive representatives had stopped to listen. "I propose that we do nothing hasty," said. "I propose that we take time to study the cipher's contents carefully. I propose that we share the knowledge fairly among all species. And I propose that we remember how it was opened, not with force, not with brilliance, with curiosity and humility." He paused. "We have been blind, my friends, blind to our own arrogance, blind to the value of different perspectives. The human did not succeed because he was smarter than us. He succeeded because he was willing to be a student when we insisted on being masters." After spoke, the mood in the chamber shifted, not completely. There were still those who wanted to control the data, still those who distrusted the humans, still those who feared what the cipher's contents might mean. But words had planted a seed. Over the next few hours, a compromise was reached. The cipher's data would be stored in a secure facility controlled by a joint committee representing all species. It would be studied carefully. Dangerous information would be reviewed before being released, but eventually all of it would be shared. And would not be studied, he would be recognized instead. The council voted to give him an official title, first reader of the. It was an honor that had never existed before, created specifically for him. He would be invited to help interpret the cipher's contents. His perspective would be valued. When the session finally ended, Admiral Minu turned to with a rare smile. "You handled that well," he said. "I did not do anything," replied. "I just sat here." "Sometimes that is exactly the right thing to do." Minu looked down at the chamber where representatives were slowly filing out. "You showed them that humans can be patient, that we do not always need to fight. That was worth more than any speech I could have given." Thought about that. He thought about the cipher and the galaxy that was suddenly looking at humanity in a new way. "What happens now?" he asked. Minu shrugged. "Now we learn, now we grow. Now we find out what they really wanted to teach us." "And what if we do not like what we learn?" Minu smiled again. "Then we do what humans have always done. We adapt, we keep going, we find a way." It was not much of an answer, but somehow it was enough. 3 weeks had passed since the cipher was opened, and the galaxy was still trying to catch its breath. The data from the crystal had exceeded everyone's wildest dreams. Star maps showed routes to distant galaxies that would have taken millions of years to reach with current technology. But buried in the data were designs for new engines, new drives, new ways of bending space that could cut those journeys down to decades, maybe less. Medical formulas had already been extracted and tested, cures for diseases that had plagued dozens of species for centuries, treatments that could extend, repair damaged organs, even reverse certain types of genetic conditions. Hospitals across the galaxy were working around the clock to implement the new knowledge. And there were warnings too, information about cosmic dangers that no one had known existed, black holes that were not quite black holes, energy beings that lived in the spaces between stars, ancient weapons left behind by civilizations even older than the still drifting in forgotten corners of the universe. The galaxy had much to learn and much to fear. But for now, life continued. Sat in his small quarters aboard the horizon, staring at the screen was filled with messages, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, he had stopped counting days ago. Job offers poured in from every corner of the galaxy. Research institutes wanted him to lead projects. Universities wanted him to lecture. Governments wanted him to consult. Several alien corporations had offered amounts of money so large that could not even understand the numbers. And then there were the stranger messages. Marriage proposals from species he had never heard of, invitations to religious ceremonies where he would be as a prophet, threats from groups who believed he had unleashed something terrible, fan mail from young beings across the galaxy who now considered him their hero. Had not replied to any of them. A knock came at his door. He knew who it was without looking up. "Come in." The door slid open and stepped inside. She looked tired. Everyone looked tired these days. The Horizon's crew had been working non-stop, managing the endless stream of communications, requests, and demands that came with being associated with the most famous human in history. You missed dinner, she said. I was not hungry. Sat down on the edge of his bunk. You have to eat, you cannot hide in here forever. I am not hiding, I am processing. You have been processing for 3 weeks. Set down his and rubbed his eyes. I do not know how to do this, I am not a hero, I am not a leader, I am just a software engineer who got lucky. You were not lucky, said firmly. You saw something that no one else could see. You approached the problem in a way that no one else thought to try. That is not luck, that is who you are. Then who I am is apparently very valuable, said bitterly. Everyone wants a piece of me, everyone wants to use me for something. Was quiet for a moment, then she reached over and took his hand. I know this is hard, she said. I know you never wanted any of this, but look at what you have done. People are going to live who would have died. Diseases are being cured. The galaxy is safer because of warnings we would never have received. You did that. I just opened the door. Someone had to open the door, and that someone was you. She squeezed his hand. I am not saying you have to enjoy this. I am not saying you have to become some kind of celebrity, but you cannot pretend it did not happen. You cannot go back to being invisible. Looked at her, she was right, of course. She was usually right. It was one of the things he liked about her. She did not let him hide from difficult truths. What am I supposed to do? He asked. Whatever you want, replied. That is the beautiful thing about being famous. Everyone wants your attention. You get to choose who deserves it. Thought about that? He thought about all the messages on his. Most of them were from people who wanted to use him. But some of them were different. Some of them were from scientists who just wanted to understand how he thought. Some were from teachers who wanted to bring his approach to their students. Some were from young humans who felt small and awkward and alone, who had seen what he did and felt hope for the first time. Maybe he could help them, maybe he could teach them what he had learned, not the technical stuff. Anyone could learn that, but the other thing, the willingness to approach problems with curiosity instead of force. The courage to admit that you do not know everything. The patience to let things teach you instead of trying to conquer them. I want to stay on the horizon, he said finally. Blinked, you want to stay here, you could go anywhere, you could have anything. I know, but this is where I belong, this is where I am comfortable, and there is still work to do. He gestured at his. The cipher's data is still being translated. There are parts of it that no one understands yet, maybe I can help with that. Smiled, it was a real smile, warm and genuine. You want to keep solving puzzles. It is what I am good at. It is what you are great at. She stood up and pulled him to his feet. Come on, let us get some food. Admiral Minu wants to talk to you anyway, something about a new project. They walked through the corridors of the horizon together. Crew members nodded as they passed. Some of them smiled, a few saluted. He was not sure how to feel about that, but he was learning to accept it. The mess hall was busy when they arrived, got his food and found a quiet table near the window. The stars stretched out before him, endless and vast. Somewhere out there, the knowledge of the was already changing things. New ships were being designed, new medicines were being developed, new paths were being charted to places no one had ever seen. And somewhere out there, other civilizations were waking up. The cipher's opening had been broadcast across the galaxy. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew that a human had done it. Species that had looked down on humanity were now looking at them with new eyes, some with respect, some with fear, some with curiosity. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Sat down across from him. What are you thinking about? Watched a Pelion cruiser drift past the viewport. Its lights dipped briefly. A salute. A gesture of respect from a species that had considered humans primitive just a month ago. I am thinking about he said, about why they left the cipher, about what they were really trying to teach us. And what do you think it was? Took a bite of his food. It was simple stuff, rice, vegetables, the same kind of meal he had eaten 1,000 times back on Earth. Some things did not change, no matter how much the universe around you shifted. I think they were lonely, he said finally. I think they had been alone for so long that they wanted someone to understand them, not just their technology, not just their knowledge, them, who they were, what they valued, why they did the things they did. He looked at everyone who tried to crack the cipher, treated it like an obstacle, a wall to break down, but it was never a wall, it was a hand reaching out. They were asking, is there anyone out there who will meet us as equals? Is there anyone who will try to understand instead of conquer? And you were the first one to answer yes. Shrugged, I did not know I was answering anything, I just wanted to know how it worked. Laughed softly, that is the most you thing you have ever said. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the stars continued their endless dance. Ships came and went from Helix Prime. The universe kept moving, indifferent to the small drama that had just unfolded within it. But not entirely indifferent. Something had changed. A door had opened, a connection had been made, and the galaxy, for all its vastness, felt a little bit smaller. Admiral Minu appeared at their table. He looked less tired than usual, almost cheerful. I have good news. The Council has approved a new expedition. We are going to follow one of the star maps, see where it leads. They want you to come along. Looked up, why me? Because you understand how they think, or at least you understand better than anyone else. Minyu smiled. Besides, who knows what we will find out there? There might be more puzzles to solve. Thought about it? A few months ago, he had wanted nothing more than to stay in his small room and work on his code. Now he was being asked to explore the unknown reaches of space, following the path of a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. It was terrifying, it was exciting, it was completely insane. Okay, he said, I will do it. Grinned, I am coming too, obviously. Obviously, Minyu agreed. We leave in 1 week, get some rest, you are going to need it. He walked away, leaving it alone with their thoughts in the stars. The galaxy had spent 4,000 years building bigger hammers to break down the cipher's door. In the end, all it took was one quiet man with a screwdriver, willing to ask instead of demand, willing to learn instead of conquer. They had been waiting a long time for someone like him. And now finally, their waiting was over.